Before we begin, no, it's not the katana. But having said that, it's also not the longsword. It's a complex discussion and we've got a lot to talk about, so let's get into it. If you've been watching my content lately, there's been a topic that has caused me to start thinking about weapons for self-defense lately. I would want the self-defense weapon to be able to incapacitate the opponent in multiple ways, so have versatility to be able to do this, not just in one single attack that has to land in one area. With that standard, that I feel a good self-defense weapon should be able to fully incapacitate someone with a good solid strike in multiple areas. Well, a large bladed tool to hold up their hands, a good solid strike, you can strike from multiple areas, you get thrusting. Thrusting is an interesting one when it comes to machetes. We'll talk about that a bit more. But the point is, this is why the sword is still actually a great self-defense weapon, because it has that capacity. Someone gets a solid cut on the arm, especially if you're dealing with a sword that can do serious damage and has the potential to chop off an arm. Well, you're dealing with a serious weapon that has some very powerful stopping power. Why is a one-handed weapon better? And for me, when I consider it, and this is why I agree, having a free hand is, depending on who you're facing, and this is also about modern contexts versus other contexts. This might not apply in other contexts where you're fighting people with weapons similar, talking about blades and swords and stuff, but we're not. A hand is a great distancing tool and a great deflecting tool, because to get the full power out of a sword, you do want distance to be able to get a full strike in, full powered strike. And so even when they rush you and they get close, you can push back, strike and deflect. And so having a free hand is also great, because it also means you could use other weapons or tools to help out, still get the distance that you want, and you get full versatility as well. So that's why the sword is still a viable pick when you look at and consider many weapons. Sword against gun, obviously not a good matchup. And if you're in a situation that you can't run away, there's a but. I mean, having a sword is better than nothing, and I think having a sword would be better than having a smaller knife or something. It has a higher chance of incapacitating the opponent. I'm not saying take on someone with a gun, all right? I'm saying if there was like a no retreat scenario, at least a sword would be better than nothing. But the other weapons that you're likely to face in a modern setting, very commonly, are knives. Very common for people to wear knives. And unarmed. Attacking you without a weapon, something breaks out, and if you get attacked by an unarmed opponent, having a sword gives you a massive power. In fact, that sword might be enough to just cease the conflict right there, because it's so intimidating and threatening. They know they're going to get cut up, potentially killed if they attack you with it. Could end the conflict right there. So a deterrent by display of force is a real thing. In all these situations, excluding the gun, but all these other weapons, the sword gives you a profoundly significant advantage. The types of swords that people default to mostly when they look at a bladed object for self-defense are machetes. Surprisingly, they're actually really good for reasons that I'm going to explain in this video. It's not the best though. I actually think there is a type of sword that excels far beyond just general machetes. Machetes actually have problems. One of the first things to consider in terms of this is reach. You want a weapon that will have higher chances to outreach the most common types of weapons you'll be faced with. And if you're going to be faced with things like, more often, knives, unarmed, and things like that, something as long as a longsword will be very effective. I'm not saying it wouldn't, but it also is a little bit of overkill, because a shorter weapon will outreach very well these other types of sword weapons, but it would also be more convenient. Something as big as this is really awkward, it will get in the way a lot, and that's a problem. So you want it to be able to outreach most of the weapons, so long enough to outreach the weapons, but short enough to be worn easily, concealably, and we also want it one-handed. So already, we are coming to one of the weapons we started with in this discussion. the machete fills those criteria really well. The other good thing about machetes is that they do fall in that optimal range. They will outrange a lot of weapons that you would fight with, more commonly, like knives and people being unarmed. I'd kind of want a bit longer than this, but this is certainly adequate. Very, versatile in one hand. And one of the things that I think is important in terms of the right size for this modern day self-defense weapon is that it's still very versatile. Like, you can strike really well when someone is grappling you close up. Like with this, you can absolutely do crazy lethal strikes, whereas with a much longer sword, and look, this is two-handed, like very hard to do that in such a close situation. That's not to say you can't use long swords or other similar length swords in close range. You absolutely can. It is just that with shorter swords, it's easier, of course. And you want them to be able to avoid being grappled. This is why machetes are already better than sticks, because they have an edge. But we come to the grappling, disarming thing, because they could try and grab the back end of the machete. But okay, so optimal length. Like, you can do some seriously lethal stuff really close range with machete. So have we come all around in a circle? We come back to the machete being better than even the historical swords of self-defense in a modern context? I would say yes, but didn't I say that the machete isn't the best pick? I did. Machete is still great, and for the reasons that we explained, even better than the more popular historical choices. But it does have a severe weakness and limitation. One is that their inability to thrust well. In fact, a lot of machetes have a rounded tip and can't thrust at all, but even this is very poor at thrusting. And there's another really big question in regards to, if you're going to be using a machete-like sword for self-defense, why single-edged? Now, there are historical swords that were single-edged, of course, and they get great benefits out of it, and there's a reason why they were made that way. A machete takes advantage of nearly none of that. And so double-edged is actually gives you more options in ways to attack. There's another huge advantage if you had a double-edged blade over a regular machete. It goes back to that grappling thing. People were already kind of reluctant to, would be reluctant to grapple a machete. But they can try it because of the back edge. If you had another edge on there, grappling a sword like that, it can be done. It's very dangerous, and in a lot of situations would give the advantage to you, because when you pull it, try and yank it out, you will be cutting them, damaging them. So we've come to an interesting conclusion. Something of a machete's size, this is a really crap one. This is a great one. Something of a machete's size, but double-edged, straight, with the one thing that machete is great is the weight concentration, the cutting capacity. The thing is with machete, you can get such devastating cutting capacity in a double-bladed sword just as much. It's not about profile, it's about weight distribution and edge geometry. And so the interesting thing, when we consider all these things that we talked about in this video, there is a sword type, sword profile that fills all the criteria that we wanted. And there are many examples in the medieval period, but there's a more popular and commonly known sword type that also fills it. And because it's more popular, you'll be aware of it. That's why I'm going to pick this one as the point of reference. It's the gladius. The gladius is a devastating cutting beast. Point, like, gosh, holy crap, that is insane. And with it being double-edged, all right, you can strike with the back edge, get far more versatility. There we go. Honestly, a gladius or gladius type sword is my pick for the best sword for modern day self-defense. And with that in mind, I decided to go online to have a look at what was available online, what types of swords you could get online that would fill all the requirements and probably be a bit easier to wear. Yes, the United Cutlery Combat Commander Gladius sword. And wow, the weight in this is just phenomenal. Like, you get, really, really good. Really versatile, but in terms of its cutting capacity, gosh, I could just feel it in the weight. This really, really good and far more versatile in the hand. This is actually one of the better ones out of all the modern day swords I picked. The convenience of this United Cutlery Gladius is great. Its weight is brilliant. And at the moment it's probably my #1 pick, actually, for what I could find available. This modern day kind of tactical design Gladius is a vastly better pick in my opinion. Vastly, all right, maybe I'm over exaggerating, I do that for hyperbole, but it is much better. I do feel it is much better than the kind of default sword people pick when they think of modern day self-defense. I always go to the Machetes when sword design and sword diversity and all their designs, there's so many to consider, all right? When considering them all, this hits so many of the points that you want really, really well. The best sword for modern day self-defense is a Gladius-like sword. Thanks for visiting the Shadlands, the place to find quick and easy to watch sword-related content. This video was a supercut or clip from a larger Shadiversity video. If you'd like to see the full-length video, please click on the provided links, and I hope to see you in the future.